and hopefully we can get into chapter 6. Chapters 5 and 6 are, well, actually, chapter 2 and chapter 5 and chapter 6 are the ones that you see in children's Sunday school lessons. Okay? You don't see much else of Joshua in children's Sunday school lessons. So we're going to go to some of the good stuff here. Okay? All right. Now, what's happened is they have crossed the Jordan. They've moved into the official promised land, and so now you got all the people around are seeing what's going on. When all the kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan to the west and all the kings of the Canaanites by the sea heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the Israelites. Well, you would figure that would be the case. Okay? At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives, and this one doesn't get into your children's Sunday school class. Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites a second time. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeah Haraloth. This is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the warriors had died during the journey, during the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt. Although all the people who came out had been circumcised, yet all the people born on the journey through the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. Well, how about that? For the Israelites traveled 40 years in the wilderness until all the nations, the warriors who came out of Egypt, perished, not having listened to the voice of the Lord. To them the Lord swore that he would not let them see land that he had sworn to their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So it was their children whom he raised up in their place that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. Talk about having trust in your leaders. Okay. When the circumcising of all the nation was done, they remained in the place in the camp until they were healed. The Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt. And so that place is called Gilgal to this day. Gilgal meaning rolled away kind of thing. All right, this is one of my favorite parts right here. While the Israelites were camped at Gilgal, they kept the Passover in the evening of the 14th day of the month on the plains of Jericho. And the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and roasted grain. The manna ceased on the day they ate the produce of the land, and the Israelites no longer had manna. They ate the crops of the land of Canaan that year. All right, when I moved my daughter to Tennessee for her first job out of college, we loaded up I don't know how she accumulated all this loot, but it was a U-Haul towing my van full of haul and her car full of haul and cats. And we made it to Tennessee and unloaded all her stuff. And on the day that I left to come back to North Carolina, we went to a Waffle House, and I quoted to her from the 5th chapter of Joshua. On the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, the unleavened cakes, roasted grain. The manna ceased on that day.
It wasn't about the circumcision.
No. It wasn't about the previous verses.
Okay.
Yeah, I just told her that this is the day the manna ceased. Okay. Hopefully all your children get to that point. All right. This is another one of my really favorite verses too. It's 13. Once when Joshua was by Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you one of us or one of our adversaries?" He replied, "Neither, but as commander of the Lord's army have I now come." Oh boy. Okay. Every army in battle prays that God will be on their side. During our Civil War, good Christians on both sides prayed for victory against the other. What does this verse tell you? It says, I'm not on your side, and I'm not against you. God has God's own agenda. And what we should be praying, and I've been there, what we should be praying is, Lord, keep me faithful to you in the midst of all of this. And if I can be a support to you in the midst of all of this, help me to make it so. Okay? We all get scared. We all get nervous. Right now we're on the precipice of all kinds of engagements. We may find ourselves once again at war, depending on how stupid they want to get in Russia and how stupid they want to get in Iran. Their decisions, we can influence them or try to. We're finding we don't have as much influence as we thought, okay? The negotiations that we initiated with lots of ammunition in our magazines, all kinds of sanctions that we can use, there are military options that we can use. We are a really big deal. I just want you to know, a lot of people, a lot of people are diminishing the United States and everything. The United States is a really, really big deal. And other nations need to pay attention to us if they want to prosper. But evidently, there are some nations out there that have an agenda that they don't care whether they prosper or not. And so when you're talking to people like that, it's like talking to a wall. When I came back from the U.S. Army Center of Military History, they gave me a whole bunch of official history books, which is way cool. But one of them that I found really interesting was it's a history of the negotiations that took place at the ceasefire in the Korean War. And it shows what it's like to negotiate with people that have no interest in peace. And they really don't care how many people die. It's not part of their agenda. It's part of our agenda that we don't have as many casualties as possible on both sides. Okay? But the other side didn't care how many casualties they had. It didn't matter to them at all how many casualties they had. And so when you appeal to their sense of compassion for their own people, they don't have any. And this is true with the people that we're trying to negotiate with now. Okay? So we actually may end up in the midst of this conflict. I'll tell you what, if they don't come around, and if they do something really, really stupid over there, like attack American soldiers, we have...
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about Iran right now, because they're the ones that are threatening us. But what we have based in Diego Garcia right now in the Indian Ocean can just annihilate that country with impunity, total impunity. And but these are apocalyptically minded people, and they think that this conflagration is going to bring about the return of the great Caliph. And whoop-de-doo, what did a Caliph ever do for you? But anyway, we're dealing with people who do not have the same mindset that we do. It makes perfect sense to them. Okay. We don't understand, we tend to not understand the Russian mindset, but the Russian mindset is one that has been evident for thousands of years in Russia. We're not dealing with some crazy guy. We're just dealing with a Russian. Okay. So here's the angel of God standing there with a sword, drawn. All right? When military people greet each other, especially different ranks, they'll salute each other. And the salute comes from a gesture that was done among knights, where they would raise the visor of their helmet so you could see their face, and you could see that they had no weapon in their hand. Okay? This ain't a salute. This is a threat. And the question was not, are you on our side or the adversary's side? The question that the angel has is, are you on my side? Are you going to follow my orders? And too many times when we pray, we want to give God orders. Don't work that way. Oh, good. Okay. Chapter 6. Now, this is the one everybody, all the kids like. Okay. Oh, okay. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, "What do you command your servant, my lord?" The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Now, who else was told by an angel to do that? Moses. Okay, who's Joshua? Moses. Okay, there you go. So you see the repetitive things that happen that verify that the person has God speaking to him. In the case of Moses, it was a burning bush, and in this one, it's a drawn sword and an angel. All right, now Jericho was shut up inside and out because of the Israelites. No one came out and no one went in. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have handed Jericho over to you along with its king and soldiers. You shall march around the city, all the warriors circling the city once. This you shall do for 6 days, with 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing the trumpets. When they make a long blast with the ram's horn, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and all the people shall charge straight ahead." So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord." To the people he said, "Go forward and march around the city. Have the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord." As Joshua had commanded, the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord, went forward blowing the trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. The rear guard came after the ark while the trumpets blew continually. To the people Joshua gave a command, "You shall not shout or let your voice be heard, nor shall you utter a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout." They're marching around, they're blowing horns, and everybody is marching in silence. And the people in Jericho are looking at this and saying, "What?" Because typically when armies faced off against each other, the armies would shout and yell, and they'd get, it was a pep rally. Make sure that thing doesn't fall through. Yeah. So this just is there to increase tension and intimidation. Okay? It also shows a tremendous amount of discipline on the part of the army because they're not making a sound. Let me tell you something. It is not easy for an army not to make a sound.
Yeah.
Okay? One of the things I remember when I was going through basic training is when they had us out with our gear on and we had to run down the street. And it sounded like a herd of cattle. All the canteens rattling and mess kits and everything was banging and everything. By the time we got done with basic training, they could run down the street, you couldn't hear them.
Yeah.
Okay? You learn. Because if it's banging around, you're going to lose it. So this showed a lot of discipline. Oh, I was watching the parade yesterday, of course. birthday of the Army. We're so proud. And remember I told you about the Russian parade? And I said we could beat these guys because they're wasting time on all kinds of stuff. We really looked sloppy. I mean, it was sloppy. Every one of these units that came by, except for the junior ROTC in West Point, I couldn't tell which half of them were in step. They were just totally out of step. And they're marching in front of the President of the United States and they can't keep a cadence. And I thought, what the heck is going on here? You know? And I'm looking at, okay, and I'm thinking, okay, here's the Russian, because they're doing to us what I was doing, okay? And here's the Chinese. And they're looking at these sloppy guys walking past, and they can't keep it in step. And you know how the Russians are and the Chinese, when they're going, they're all absolutely in step, and every rifle is at the same angle, and they all snap their heads at the same time, and you know, all of that. Okay, well, what this tells you is that we're not wasting time on that stuff. That's what that means. We're not wasting time with that stuff. You don't want to mess with these guys because the things they're trained for is like killing you. That's it. You know, that's all it's about. And so yeah, we looked bad. We looked slovenly. We didn't have a whole bunch of dress uniforms out there on the regular troops. But when an M1 tank rolls down your street and you're the target, okay, just know this, that when they shoot at you, okay, when they shoot at you, you only have to worry about that one projectile, but they will blow out every window on that street. It is really, really bad. I mean, you get around one of those guns goes off, it's like, my goodness, the whole earth is coming in. But and they are so deadly. And I'm looking at the upgrades that they've done on the Bradleys and on the Strikers and stuff. You won't worry about whether they got their left foot and right foot right. I'll tell you what, those are some tough dudes out there. They're really, that's a mean machine coming down that street. Okay, but our adversaries will say that we don't have control over our men because they're not walking in cadence. Okay, they are so far past basic training, and these other armies are not. They're wasting all their time on head snaps. Okay?
You know, that's a good point, because you don't really see that when you see what they're doing. You feel like they're so more superior than we are.
That's the impression.
Yeah.
That's the impression. But like that artillery, I mean, since the ladies made calculations in World War II for us, we can take artillery from miles and miles and miles away from each other and put a round on a place at the same time from 200 guns. Boom. You don't have time to get into a foxhole. It just happens. I mean, and we've been doing this since World War II. And I mean, it's just, if they can keep that in step, I don't worry about the parade. You know? Okay, so now they're doing it. As Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 carrying trumpets, sworn, Okay, with the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord following them, the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. The rear guard came after the Ark while the trumpets blew continually. To the people Joshua gave this command, you shall not shout. Okay, we did that. So the Ark of the Lord went around the city, circling it once, and they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the Ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Lord passed on, blowing the trumpets continually. The armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the Ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. On the 2nd day, they marched around the city once, and then returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Then, of course, on the 7th day, we know what they did on the 7th day. They all walked around the city, okay? They're all blowing horns. And At the end of the thing, on the seventh day, they gave a shout. Okay, and what happened when they shouted? The walls fell down. Okay. Let me talk to you about Jericho. Okay. Jericho was a late Bronze Age city. And in the 1950s, there was a woman who was an archaeologist who went out there from England. And she did an excavation of Jericho, and she determined that Jericho had been destroyed long before Israel showed up. And it was probably destroyed by the Egyptians. Okay? Well, she wasn't that good an archaeologist. But anyway, people for many, many years have looked at her report and taken it as gospel that Jericho, there was another explanation for the ruins of Jericho that had nothing to do with Joshua. Okay, now understand, her determination was that Jericho had been destroyed 150 years before Joshua. Other archaeologists have gone in there and they said, you know, she may be a woman, but she's wrong.
Imagine that.
I'm just saying. And there are a couple of reasons why they said she was wrong. One of them was that she was not a pottery expert, and they excavated pottery in the ruins of Jericho that post-dated anything that the Egyptians could have done, and that came up to a point right around 1400 BC. Okay? So this one archaeologist said, I can tell you it was in 1406 that it took place. And one of the reasons why, I guess, is they done the geological study and determined that there was a point at which, in the harvest season, that the waters of the Jordan did not flow. And the reason why it did not flow, they surmised, is that up near, where was it? Adam, that's the name of the thing. Up near Adam, there was a dam. And what happened was that the river does a snake thing about 15 miles upstream. And it's got big earthen banks around it. And had there been an earthquake, those banks would have fallen into the river and dammed it up. And that did happen in 1927. And the river was dammed up for 20 hours in 1927. So we've seen a repeat of this in modern times. And so that, you know, you had dry land and you had time for people to cross over. There were also pieces of pottery that were Egyptian in origin. And the pottery was like just like a carving of or a mold of a scarab, which was a favorite Egyptian bug. And on the reverse side of it, they would put the name of somebody or, you know, some kind of inscription on the back of this thing. And it was like a paperweight kind of thing, and or scroll weight, I guess. But they had insignias from pharaohs that went all the way up to 1400 BC. So the city was intact until that point. And then it was utterly destroyed. A couple of things. I mean, they're talking here about when the walls fell down, the army charged in and killed everybody and burned the city utterly. They only took the valuable metals, one of which was iron. So you know you're at the end of the Bronze Age, okay? So the way the city was constructed was it's on a hill, and what they did was they dug a trench and a berm, and they had a retaining wall behind the berm, okay, so that the berm wouldn't erode, and that would block any kind of water from getting into the berm, okay. Then on top of that, they had mud brick, and this thing went up like 40 feet. It was way up there. So they had red brick, and the red brick on top is what fell. So now, when that red brick fell, you not only had a ramp up to the top of the lower wall, you also had all this stuff on the other side, so you could go right down. Okay, so it was easily breached, and they found one section of wall on the north side that did not collapse. And they're thinking, that's where that Rahab character was. Okay, and then they came in, and like I said, they only took the precious metals. They didn't take anything else. Well, what they found in there, because this is the time of harvest, okay, and the people were expecting a siege, and they have a really good spring inside the city, so they got a water supply. They found jars and jars and jars of grain in the ruins. Now, you know if an army comes in there, they're going to take the food. Okay? Also, the jars were full. So we know that these people weren't eating very much out of those jars before they were attacked. And so they didn't have time to consume the reserves that they had for a siege. So this thing, the amount of grain that they found, okay, they estimate that the primary population of Jericho at that time was 600 people. And then you had all the other people who would come into the city. So you're looking maybe like 1,000 people that would have been in. The grain stores that they saw would have sustained them for about a year. Okay? But the grain wasn't looted. It wasn't taken. And they found that the city had been completely burned. It was completely burned. So everything that's in the story about this attack on the city coincides with the time, the methodology of what's described in the Bible. So I was surprised, because the only thing I had heard for years and years was what this lady archaeologist did. But no, the Egyptians did not destroy Jericho. And if in fact you had that seismic activity 15 miles upstream, then it seems very likely that there was seismic activity in the area generally. This could have been a huge aftershock, and down come the walls. And like I was saying last week, some miracles seem to just happen, and other miracles you walk into. They're just a matter of God's timing, knowing that there would be that aftershock, that the walls would come down. And guess who was just outside the city when that happened? Shazam, you know. But God works in mysterious ways. God works in mysterious ways. And we really, when we start thinking about God, we think about God in very particular, personal ways. And God wants us to think in terms of very personal things with God. God wants a personal relationship with each one of us. But the massive power of God is so far beyond. You start praying for stuff, and you have no idea the timing, the forces at work, what's going on. It is so far above our pay grade that we're just, we need to just stand in awe. We just need to stand in awe. You know, like there was a miracle with that little girl that was already there, and we've been praying for it. I mean, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay? God is so far ahead of us.
Okay.
So far ahead of us. And our prayers need to be less centered on us and what we want in the moment, and more centered on, you're the commander, give me the orders, like that angel. Because I think I know what's going on, but I'm not even a second lieutenant.
I've quit praying for things specific.
Mm-hmm.
I pray, your will be done.
Yeah,
I've done
That's
that a
what I
long
do.
time.
yeah.
I've done that
And
for
how
a
can I
long
help?
time.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I've prayed for too many people
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't
that
seem
have
to.
died, and I pray for your will be done.
I will say this, that God always answers prayer. Okay, but God doesn't always answer prayers the way we expect him to. All right.
Or want him to.
Or want him to. Okay, so we know what happened. Okay. Now, here's what happened after they'd taken the city. But the two men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, go into the prostitute's house. How many times does the Bible tell you to go into the prostitute's house? And bring the woman out of it and all who belonged to her as you swore to her. So the young men who had been spies went in and brought Rahab out along with her father, her mother, her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought all their kindred out and set them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the Lord. No personal spoils. Okay, Joshua told them, no personal spoils. But Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared her family, has lived in Israel ever since, for she had hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jerusalem. Joshua then pronounced this oath, saying, cursed before the Lord be anyone who tries to build this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, at the cost of his youngest he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. Well, there is still a Jericho. So somebody did it. And it's still not a big place, really. The ruins are there. You can walk through the ruins. You can see how the walls fell and all that stuff. But that curse didn't work, because Jericho was definitely rebuilt, and it's referenced in the New Testament.
Where is Jericho?
It's southeast of Jerusalem. Southeast of Jerusalem. And there is something, you have a reference to it, the Jericho Road.
How far is it from Jerusalem?
Not very far. I mean, you could walk it in a day or so. Yeah, it's not that. That's not a big country.
Yeah.
That's not a big country. But you know the story about the Good Samaritan. That's what that was about. Okay. Well, thanks for being with us, and I think I'll be here next week. I'm not sure, but I'll give you a heads up if I'm going to be or not. Okay. So keep watching. Just keep checking the church's feed on YouTube, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Thank you. Good to see you. I do it by everybody. And I like your earrings.